So when I first started out, I had this kind of like 5-year plan of what I wanted to do, right? I started by just offering services in the home and the community. And then my 5-year vision was to have a center so that I could create an actual program for adolescents and adults. Um, about a year and a half into starting Adapt, I opened my first center. So that was way faster than I expected. And then at about 2.5 years, we grew out of that center and moved into a center 4 times the size. So there's definitely been a lot of growth faster than I originally anticipated. And just looking back on those milestones makes me realize like how much I have achieved, which is really nice to be able to look back on that and like remind myself that like, oh yeah, I am moving forward in this.
All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Hart Hustle podcast. Today's going to be an amazing episode because I have an amazing leader. I have somebody who's sitting across the digital table with me who is changing the landscape of not only how we serve our community, but how she makes a difference in every person's lives who her team is impacting every single day. Jessica Workman, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is going to be a fun conversation. You know, I think it's really important for us to talk about how sometimes early in life, we are exposed to things that we are passionate about and we can turn those things into a career. In our previous discussion, you had mentioned that in high school, you were developing programs for your school district and mentoring those with disabilities. How did you start doing that at such a young age?
Yeah, that's right. So growing up, I was heavily involved in volunteering. I always wanted to give back to the community. Volunteered in various settings and then really found a calling in the field of special education. So when I was in high school, I started volunteering and I did a practicum with my high school special education department. Throughout that, I really just noticed that these individuals were seeking connection and they weren't getting that with their neurotypical peers. So throughout my high school journey, I worked on developing some peer-to-peer connection programming. I was involved in the Special Olympics, started unified sports at my high school just to get these individuals involved with other peers to socialize and really give them that confidence they needed in life to become their best selves. So that's how I all got started in the field of special education.
Jessica, how does a high school student take on such a huge initiative? Like, what was the experience like when you're sitting around in high school and recognizing that there are people who are going to our school who aren't having the social connection that they need? Maybe other people are looking at them in a different way than others. What were some of those early conversations maybe that you had with yourself, with your parents, with leaders of the school? What was that process like?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's because I was always the type of person who just wanted to help other people. Growing up, a lot of my models were those that were in the field of helping others. I would say in middle school, my middle school principal was a big advocate for volunteering, and I think that's why I found my passion in volunteering and then discovered this population. I was always wanting to be a good student, so obviously hearing my principal saying he advocates for volunteers, I wanted to do that myself. So that's kind of how I found that calling, I suppose, then which led me to special education. So yeah, after high school, I went on to college studying special education, got my undergrad in special education, and then throughout my studies, I kind of discovered the world of applied behavior analysis. So I ended up going back to school, got my master's in applied behavior analysis. So now I'm a board certified behavior analyst. And then throughout my practicum studies that I needed to complete to obtain my BCBA, I found that there was a real lack of services for adults specifically in the field of ABA special education. So that's how I really landed where I am right now, just discovering that there's a lack of those specific services for adults. And that's how I am where I am today, which, as we spoke before, so I'm the founder of Adapt Transition Services in Massachusetts. We work with adolescents and adults on the autism spectrum. We do center-based, community-based, home-based services. We really just work on those functional skills that these individuals are seeking out to become independent and lead the life that they want to live going into adulthood.
You said something that was really powerful in our last conversation together. You said, it is so important to not be afraid to start something that isn't out there already. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the field of ABA, it's mostly insurance-based services that ABA provides. And with my focus on adolescents and adults, there's really not much out there. There's some state-funded programs. However, those programs are lacking a lot of supports. So I really saw that gap in services. And I was like, so how can I fix this gap? So when I was in college, I did a thesis on the gap of services between adolescence and adulthood, found that there was a lack of adequate supports available. So throughout my studies, I said, you know what, I'm going to fill this gap and create a program that is targeted towards these individuals. And that was a big risk because there was nothing out there already, but I knew that if I want to provide services to these individuals, they deserve quality services, that I'm going to need to go out there and create something. So in Massachusetts specifically, the reason why I am able to provide ABA-based services to adults is because a lot of insurance companies have lifted the age cap on ABA. A lot of insurance companies say when you turn the age of 21, you're no longer eligible for ABA services. So that's why I would say a lot of these individuals don't have adequate supports. However, that age cap was lifted in Massachusetts, which is why I'm able to provide those intrusive supports for these adults and increase their independence into adult life.
How would you foster the mindset to be able to go against the grain so heavily? I'm always interested when I sit across the table with amazing leaders like you who are doing things that other people aren't willing to do. How did you get the bravery in order to say, okay, I see what the landscape of the current marketplace looks like. There are some gaps here. I'm going to fill those gaps. Was that a scary process? Like, how did you build up the confidence to be able to go out into the market and do that stuff?
So it was scary. I will say my family was very hesitant about what I was going out to do just because it wasn't already out there. But really writing that thesis, I talked to a lot of families who were advocating for their children, saying these services aren't available. What is available is not adequate. We really want something that will increase independence going into adulthood. So I knew there was a need out there. So I feel like having that mission to set out and create something for these individuals, that was what helped me start Adapt. So there was a little bit of fear because it wasn't already out there, but I knew that this was for the greater good of the population. So that's what really pushed me forward in creating Adapt.
Did you have any other entrepreneurs or creators in your life? Like, were your parents business owners or anybody who's done this stuff before?
No, not at all. I would say I'm definitely in a different career path than the people I grew up with, my family. Human services field, no one was really as interested in that as I was in helping other people. So it was a lot of just self-discovery as I went, learning how to do things. But yeah, I wouldn't say there were any real big influences in that entrepreneur side of things.
Who did you look to for the confidence when you were just starting out? Because if we don't see it around us, we often have to look outward. So what type of people were you looking to? Like, what was your mindset like in trying to figure out how you're going to be able to build this thing?
Yeah, I would say just looking at like some of those founders of ABA, I would say, when they started out, this was something new as well. So just having them in mind really pushed me forward.
I mean, it's incredible. It's so interesting when I get the opportunity to talk to founders on this podcast, because we're born with a different knack to explore things. You know, when I started my first company in 2014, we started as a telehealth company. I had the fortune of coming home one day after a really terrible summer job, and I was looking at how I could start a business, and I came across this new bill that had been passed in the state of Nevada that said that you were going to be able to have a virtual interaction with your healthcare provider, and they could be paid as if it happened in person. And my brain started going crazy. I was like, this is going to be the future. But when I started going out into the marketplace and talking to hospitals and CEOs and chief medical officers, everybody shot me down. And so it really kind of had me reinforce the idea, if you truly believe in something, there's going to be a lot of people along the way who aren't going to believe in you. And if you just stick with it long enough, you can truly be successful. And I'm guessing that you went through some of that journey with yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There was definitely a lot of skepticism. I mean, creating something that's not already in existence. But yeah, don't be afraid to take that risk, because you never know how many people it's going to benefit. And even right now, we have a huge waitlist for services, which we're trying to meet the need of the community, but that just speaks volumes to how much this service is needed.
Let's talk a little bit about the current landscape of kind of what things are looking like. So Massachusetts, huge waitlist. What does that mean? What are some of the gaps that you guys are trying to fill?
Yeah, so it's really just being able to adequately staff these individuals. So a lot of adults, adolescents, they find out about our services that they were unaware about that were in existence. So they get on this wait list to obtain our services, and it's really just making sure we have adequate levels of clinicians available to provide that quality treatment that we want. So there's definitely a lot of individuals. I mean, the statistics of autism just went way up. So a lot of individuals are turning into adults now and looking for services. So the need is huge.
I mean, when I first started working in this space in 2017, 2018, it was 1 in 56 children were being diagnosed with autism. As of this year, it was 1 in 36 children. And so if you think about the growing number of people in our communities who need to be served, this is a total addressable market that continues to grow every single year. Has that given you confidence in being able to say, like, we are in the right spot, in the right type of business, at the right type of time to be able to serve the people who are going to need us in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a growing field, so there's always going to be opportunity there. And these individuals deserve quality care. So I think that if we can just keep raising awareness, spreading our resources, then we'll be able to help more people as they age and grow into adults.
There was a part of what you guys do at Adapt, which is, you know, you guys have a philosophy of family-centered approach. What does that mean?
Yeah, so at Adapt, we really value compassionate care. So we want to involve the whole family in the care. It's not just the clients that we're serving, but it's also their whole families, their family dynamic extended, how they interact with other individuals. So we really try to involve everyone in that care. We want to get everyone's buy-in as well. I think forming that like trust with the family is the most important thing. Because if a family doesn't trust what you're doing with their child, they're not going to support it when they're not receiving that one-on-one care. So buy-in is huge. And then not only for the parents, but siblings as well. If siblings don't know why you're doing something, they might not support their skill development in the outside world as well. And then, I mean, families are the primary caregivers. These individuals are with their families more than they're with us. So I think it's really important to involve families in that treatment so that they can work on those skills when we're not there ourselves.
You know, I've been on the podcast, I've been talking a lot about the topic of agency, right? One's own perceived perspective and being able to control and impact their world. Now, one of the things that I came across in another podcast that I was listening to was a way to determine if people have agency. And the highest people with agency and often the most successful people have an interesting common thread about their upbringing. So, Jessica, did you have any weird type of hobbies when you were growing up as a kid that maybe you didn't share with your friends that you like to do on the weekend that you might have been a little bit embarrassed of?
I don't know if I would say it was any strange hobbies, but I volunteered a lot growing up, as I said earlier. And I think that's not something that peers my age were doing. Growing up, I feel like a lot of people were more concerned with popularity and things like that, but I was more concerned with how can I help other people. So I would say that's one of the, I guess, weirder things that I would do growing up. Just that mentality of wanting to give back to other individuals rather than focusing on myself.
And exactly what you just demonstrated is the exact character trait of people with high agency. Now, there's an organization out there, multi-billion, and their organization leader, their CEO, often asks people who are coming into the organization, did you have any weird hobbies when you were growing up? And when they say, I did things that normally people wouldn't do, that were against the population or that weren't popular, that is the biggest indicator very early on in life that we're willing to go against the grain. And so it's really cool to kind of connect all these dots and think about how you didn't have somebody in your family who was an entrepreneur or a business owner. You saw the gaps in the marketplace and you were willing to go against the grain to create something new. Isn't that so cool?
Yeah, that is cool. And that's not a term I had heard before. So that's really enlightening to hear you say that.
It really is. I want to talk a little bit about, the process of you starting to build out your team. One thing I really appreciate is leadership often is not a skill set that we learn about in a class in college or in high school. So how did you start thinking about your persona and your personality as a leader, and how do you kind of communicate that with your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I started Adapt, it was just me and a few other colleagues who I had worked with at previous positions. Specifically for the adults, I mean, at the other jobs that I had, there weren't many adults that we were serving because they weren't seeking insurance funding for adults like I had. So when I started Adapt, it was really just me finding some adults who are in need of services and then going through that process with them. And then
What is that? What is that like, Jessica? I need to know, like, what is that process like? Because I'm trying to put myself and the audience in like the position of you sitting like in your room as an example and being like, okay, if I'm going to start this business, I need to identify a market and people who I'm going to serve. So how did you start like tackling that problem?
I just went on a bunch of like autism platforms, Autism Speaks resources, really reached out to people, saw if anyone was interested in these services. There were some groups on Facebook that I joined of just different town groups, and I would write a post saying anyone interested in these services that I'm willing to provide. So that's really how I got my start, and also talking to like DDS, Department of Developmental Services. They were able to connect me with a few families. So it was a lot of just reaching out to different people to make those connections to see who is interested in those services.
Was that scary?
It was, in a sense that I was speaking out about something that I wanted to provide that wasn't out there. I was kind of hesitant about what people's thoughts and feelings would be about that. But I would say that I quickly found that a lot of people were in need of these services. So then it just helped me move forward and create this bigger agency that we are now.
I mean, that's incredibly impressive. I just think about that internal voice, if you will, that we have to overcome so often that speaks to us and says, like, should we be posting this stuff? Should I be announcing the services that I want to serve? Like, am I qualified? What are people going to think? And the biggest journey or the biggest process of getting started is often overcoming that internal dialogue and believing in ourselves enough to be able to push through some of those insecurities or those false stories that little voice in our head often tells us. And that's why I thought it was really important to kind of dive into that, because so many people have great ideas. So many people want to make an impact, but we never get started because we're afraid to take that first step into the unknown.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's my biggest piece of advice. Don't be afraid to start something that's not already there. because that's the only way we move forward, by creating new things and bettering the population, the environment that we serve.
So when did you start Adapt? And excuse me for not having this in my notes, but how long did you guys get started?
3 years ago. So we're still relatively new. We're a team of about 50 clinicians right now, and we serve a little over 30 clients. But again, we do have a large waitlist, so we are hoping that we can continue to grow our team so that we can serve these individuals.
Do you ever get an opportunity to kind of pause and think about all the things that you've accomplished in these 3 years? Because often, when you're a person who has a high achieving mindset, it's very easy for us to get caught between where we are right now and where we're trying to get to. And often when we get it wrong, those goals that we have established for ourselves can sometimes feel like a horizon. So we take one step towards them and they move one step further away. But a way to kind of mitigate against that is to be able to look backwards and look at all the things that we've accomplished along the way. So do you get an opportunity to ever pause with everything that you're trying to do to be able to kind of appreciate everything that you've overcome to this point?
Yeah, definitely. So when I first started out, I had this kind of 5-year plan of what I wanted to do, right? I started by just offering services in the home and the community. And then my 5-year vision was to have a center, so that I could create an actual program for adolescents and adults. About a year and a half into starting Adapt, I opened my first center. So that was way faster than I expected. And then at about 2.5 years, we grew out of that center and moved into a center 4 times the size. So there's definitely been a lot of growth, faster than I originally anticipated. And just looking back on those milestones makes me realize how much I have achieved, which is really nice to be able to look back on that and remind myself that oh yeah, I am moving forward in this. I am setting out to do what I had planned.
What's one piece of advice you would give to yourself 3 years ago, knowing what you know now? If you could time travel back and have a conversation with yourself and give yourself a piece of advice, what do you think that would be?
I would say, even though this is kind of contrary to what is happening with the growth, but I would say don't grow too fast. You want to have a proper team in place, proper support to scale that growth. I think in the beginning, I was doing a lot. I was working 20 hours a day because there was always something to do. So I feel like if I had a team to help me through that process, it wouldn't have put as much stress on myself in the early stages.
I've been dealing with that personally. A big part of my maturation as a leader has been putting trust into my team to be able to do things that I think that I can do better. And I only say that because, one of the things that we see a lot of the times when we talk to founders is we often think that we have to do everything. We have to spin all the plates and balance them all at the same time. And nobody's going to be able to do, onboarding or customer success or services and everything else that we think that we're the best at. Mm-hmm. But I heard a mentor, I'm reading a book right now called Buy Your Time Back by a guy named Dan Martell. And he talks about the 80-20 principle. Now, if you're ever familiar with that, that's Pareto's principle, or it says 20% of the work that you do produces 80% of the results, right? And there's another rule called the 95-5 rule for entrepreneurs and founders, that it's 5% of the work that we actually do produces 95% of the results that we get. And when you become a better, higher level leader, we have to become very comfortable with offloading and delegating tasks to our team so they can do the work, so we can really focus on that 5% work. And one of his phrases in this book is, if somebody can do the work 80% as good as you can, that is 100% awesome. Because it's not the objective to get 10s on everything, but to build a team around us who can do 80% as good as we can so we can focus on the highest leverage tasks. What do you think about that 80-20, 80% is 100% awesome rule?
Yeah, no, I love that analogy. And as I was building my team, I really wanted to find people who were experts in this specific thing that maybe I wasn't an expert on, so I could utilize my knowledge elsewhere and really how we can continue bridging this gap. So for instance, like the administrative side of things, I'm a clinician. I didn't go to school to be in the business side of things. So really
Yeah.
hiring that side offloaded those tasks so that I could focus on the mission of how to better serve these individuals. So I definitely agree with that. In order to produce more work, you need to delegate those other tasks and really trust that your team has a handle on those tasks so you can focus on the bigger important things.
Isn't that a scary process though, when you first get started, especially talking about like, this is my baby?
It's so scary, yes. Losing that control, giving it up is so scary, but you just have to trust those people that you work with and empower them to be able to do their best work.
Leadership 101 and being a CEO is all about being able to cast a vision so large that other highly skilled people can find themselves being successful in our vision. So when it came to attracting, those first couple hires and those team members, what was the vision that you were kind of casting for these people to get them to buy in to be a part of the Adapt team?
Yeah, so my vision has always been working with adults and creating a sense of community. So at Adapt, I really want to foster that like warm atmosphere where we're all working together to serve these individuals. It's not a competition or anything, that hierarchy. Like we don't want to be afraid of each other. We really want to form connections with each other, because I do think that in order to help the individuals that we're serving, we also need to be able to take care of ourselves. And one of the main indicators of like mental health is having those good relationships as well. So really forming relationships with our colleagues so we can all trust each other. We're all working together towards this common vision.
Work-life balance is really tough. I've really been trying to balance that framework of work-life integration, because the work that we do now is very much, especially in my space, is virtual. I can think about the business 24/7, and I recognize that sometimes I'm in different seasons of sacrifice. The season that I'm in right now is all about me showing up and working those long days. But later in other seasons, I'm participating, or I'm expecting that it's going to be me working and trying to delegate as much as I possibly can. What do you think about the difference between that work-life balance and that work-life integration? What does that mean to you?
I think when you work, you should be working in a field that you care about so it doesn't feel as much like work, right? And then it's really just forming boundaries so that your work doesn't interfere too much in your personal life. But I also don't want anyone coming to work dreading going to work. I want them to enjoy coming to work. So I kind of want it to have that integration where it's not something that you're not looking forward to. I want it to kind of integrate into your life. So this is just another thing you do, another thing you enjoy doing.
One of the biggest lessons that I've been trying to do in establishing and reinforcing my mindset so I can be successful over a long time horizon is exactly that, looking at things on a longer time horizon. If we're trying to build a business to $1 million, it's very different from how we try and build a business to $10 or $15 million. You have to build a foundation underneath you. So when it comes to the vision of what you guys are trying to accomplish, are you doing any type of work to try and give yourself a longer runway or a longer time horizon to accomplish the things that you guys want to? Or are you feeling like you have to rush in order to be able to meet the needs of the community?
Yeah, so I think in order to best meet the needs of the community, we have to have a strategic plan in place so that we can scale our growth, scale all of these ideas we have of how we can bridge that gap of transition to adulthood. So we do have a strategic plan in place. So all of these milestones that we do want to meet, they're laid out over the course of 3 years currently. So I would say that helps us not focus all on doing these million little tasks, but one task at a time, and really making sure that the work we are doing is quality. I feel like that strategic planning in place helps us ensure that, okay, this goal that we want to meet, we're putting all of our efforts into it right now. It's going to be quality work instead of spreading out our quality throughout a bunch of different things, just focusing on that one thing has helped us kind of keep that vision of how we're moving forward, but also keep us accountable for that quality as we get there.
I want to say it was Jeff Bezos who said, be strict on your vision, but flexible on how you get there. How are you kind of thinking about flexibility in kind of changing and adapting to meeting the needs of the community? Have you guys had to make any pivots along the way to like change up what you guys thought was going to be the plan?
Yeah, and I love that quote. I do think flexibility, curiosity, those are very powerful characteristics we have to have as a leader. There's always going to be different ways of doing things. Everyone has their own ideas. So if we have one common goal, then just hearing everyone's ideas on how to get there. If it's not originally how I thought, maybe someone else has a better idea of how to get there. So really just approaching growth with a sense of curiosity. I feel like that's kind of how we've made some pivots in our growth as well, just hearing everyone's perspective instead of just mine, listening to the staff who are doing the work day to day and hearing what they have to say about where they think this vision is going as well.
I'm interested to know what through the lens of curiosity, how are you thinking about like all the technology that we have access to as business founders here today with AI and everything else that's kind of swirling out in the world? How are you thinking about these technologies being able to support, your mission and all the stuff that you guys do at Adapt?
Yeah, so technology, I think, is a great tool if used correctly. I think technology increases your access to material. However, what's that material that's out there, maybe it's not always accurate. However, if it is, I think it's a great tool. It makes you more efficient in your work. Even technology for accessing diagnosis to autism, let's say, that could just increase the availability, access to care. So I think technology, if used correctly, is a great tool.
What's kind of your 2 cents about all the technology that's kind of swirling around us? I mean, stuff seems to be popping up every single day. How are you kind of prioritizing the things that you and your team want to explore, especially with, the need in the community that you guys are serving?
Yeah, I think you always have to be open to what's out there, learn how to use these tools. Technology can be a great learning tool as well for the individuals that we work with. Every individual has a different learning style, so you never know which tool might help them more than others. So just embracing what's out there and kind of adapting to the times and just learning what can help you become more efficient.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what the future generations of people who are going to do this work and work for you, as an example, are looking for as well. That sense of curiosity, that sense of what could this mean to me, that sense of how can we be more efficient while trying to do more with less is a real opportunity that, I think great leaders today have an opportunity to think about and also kind of prepare their organizations for in the future. And so, I'm really excited to kind of see how you guys continue to mold and shape and this early journey that you're on 3 years in, which is a huge accomplishment, by the way, and serving so many people, having a team of 50, having 30 plus clients that you guys are working with now. It's amazing. So what does the future look like for you guys? Let's take an opportunity to kind of like rub on our crystal ball, if you will, and think about what the future is going to look like.
Yeah, no, I love that. Future goals, I would love to be able to grow, expand our footprint, serve more of the community. I would love to influence some legislation that's currently out there regarding services for adults. I think there are a lot of restrictions on services that adults receive, specifically lifting the age cap for ABA services. I would love to get more involved with that. I think what I'm doing, not a lot of other people do that because of those restrictions. So if we can make some change in the world, we'd be able to better serve our community.
Well, I have no doubt that the high school student who was looking to mentor other people with disabilities and help her school district create programs and got into college and said, there's a gap here, I'm going to start my own business, although you had no reference point to that, is well suited to be able to kind of make the changes in our community that we really need.
Thank you.
So Jessica, one of the traditions we have here on the podcast as we end is our previous guest wanted to ask you a question. Now, their question was simple, and I'm really interested to kind of what you think about this.
Okay.
Their question was, as a founder and as a leader of your organization, what does courage mean to you?
I would say that courage means being brave, moving forward, even when you have setbacks. As simple as you can put it, I would say just moving forward among the adversity. That's what courage is.
Well, I really appreciate all the time that we've spent here together. I want to give you an opportunity to let people know, as the next 30 seconds, run a commercial for Adapt. How can people find more information about you guys? Where can they find Jessica if they want to follow along with your story and you're growing this amazing business?
Sure, yeah. So you can find out more about Adapt at our website, so www.adapt-aba.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Jessica Workman. We have social medias on Facebook, Instagram, Adapt Transition Services. We are located in Massachusetts, but hope to expand. So please support us in this venture of bridging the gap for adults and adolescents with autism.
Well, the order is very simple, guys. Once again, go check out Jessica, the amazing work that she's doing at Adapt ABA, and let's support her in creating this amazing organization to usher us into the future of a well-supported community with so many people who need it. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. That's a wrap.